I'm doing one video to talk about the romance in all three Star Wars trilogies. When I talked about Rapunzel and Flynn / Eugene, I made that a 4-part series. But now all 9 Star Wars films have to share one video. It shows how far Star Wars has fallen in my eyes, doesn't it? I used to be a Star Wars fan, but my love for the franchise has been broken. And as a former fan, I make this video not as a celebration, but a list of complaints about one of Star Wars' worst aspects, that being the romance. First up is Han and Leia from the original trilogy. I know a lot of you have nostalgia for Han and Leia, but I ask you to set your nostalgia aside for a minute and watch these clips with unbiased eyes. Can you do that for me?
No! That's not it. Come on. Come on.
You're imagining things.
Am I? Then why are you following me? Afraid I was gonna leave without giving you a goodbye kiss?
I just assumed it's a Wookiee.
I can arrange that.
Let go. Shh. Let go, please.
Don't get excited.
Captain, being held by you isn't quite enough to get me excited.
Sorry, sweetheart. I haven't got time for anything else.
Stop that.
Stop what?
Stop that. My hands are dirty.
My hands are dirty, too. What are you afraid of?
I might be oversensitive, maybe this is just a matter of taste, but I can't get into Han and Leia's dynamic. In A New Hope and some of The Empire Strikes Back, Han and Leia scream at each other over every excuse they can find, and we're expected to believe that they're into that. Screw you, princess, I don't care about you. I just want money. Oh yeah? Well, you're a soulless fiend and your friend is a walking carpet. Good riddance. She totally digs me. It is a commonly known fact that all love triangles are bad, and Leia demonstrates one of the many reasons why. In The Empire Strikes Back, Leia kisses Luke specifically to annoy Han. That is the type of thing that would normally pit bros against each other. Thankfully, Han and Luke have a bond Leia could never break.
Take it easy.
And Leia kissing Luke in front of Han would be less scummy if she actually had any intention of pursuing a relationship with Luke, but she's actually just giving him false hope. And why didn't Leia want a relationship with Luke when they didn't know they were related? I don't know. Leia consistently has far less animosity towards Luke, who clearly had a crush on her in the first 2 movies. And Luke is already the hero she wants Han to be.
I wonder if he really cares about anything. Or anybody.
I care.
Leia would argue with Han, try and get him to help the rebellion more, but Luke hasn't needed any convincing from her this entire time. The only way they could get out of the hole they dug with this love triangle was to retcon Luke and Leia into being brother and sister.
You love him. I won't get in the way.
It's not like that at all. He's my brother.
Which didn't make any sense until the prequels came, and it still raises a few questions. The odds of a princess randomly getting help from a farmer out of all the people in the allegedly massive galaxy who happened to be her separated at birth brother are wacky. The only reason this is at all probable is because we now know why Leia knew that Obi-Wan was the guy to call for help, and Obi-Wan is also Luke's guardian angel. But it's still nagging to think about Obi-Wan never bringing up the fact that Leia had the same potential as Luke until it was too late to capitalize on it. And I remind you that we only have these gaping plot holes as a resolution to a love triangle that never should have been introduced in the first place. And poor Luke, he doesn't have a love interest now that the token girl is taken. In the olden days they had Mara Jade in the books and comics, but she was retconned out of the canon. Did you think that a part of Star Wars lore would be preserved just because Star Wars fans like it? That's the opposite of how this works. Let's bring it back to Han and Leia. A couple can start out with animosity and grow to be more pleasant with each other to great effect. But in order to sell that, you have to use the initial rivalry as an obstacle to overcome, not as the basis for their relationship. And you cannot jump straight from hating each other to dating. Han and Leia's rushed transition from bickering to couple status is concerning. In The Empire Strikes Back, Han starts out yelling at Leia, while also insisting that his treatment of her has earned her love.
Come on! You want me to stay because of the way you feel about me?
Yes! You're a great help to us. You're a natural leader.
No!
Then he pulls a few no means yeses on her, until her resolve breaks.
Let go. Shh. Let go, please.
Don't get excited.
Stop that.
Stop what?
Very nice.
And the next thing you know, they're a couple.
I love you.
No, you don't. I will not be accused of not getting their relationship because I don't see how it works. There is something to their dynamic, and there are reasons for them to love each other. There's even a rationale behind them hating each other at first, which gets broken down, allowing them to love each other. Leia sees Han's potential, so she pushes him to do the right thing. Han initially wants to be selfish, so he responds to that aggressively, when Leia tells him to do what he should do, rather than what he wants to do, even though deep down he wants to like her can-do attitude. Han learns to do the right thing, not because someone asks him to, but because he cares about Luke. Near the end of A New Hope, Han could have left with his cash, but he came back to help Luke with the Death Star.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
Near the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, Han wanted to leave, but once he heard that Luke was in danger, he risked his life in a frozen wasteland to find him.
We'll have to go out on Tauntaun.
Sir, the temperature's dropping too rapidly.
That's right, my friend's out in it.
Your tauntaun will freeze before you reach the first marker.
Then I'll see you in hell.
And when Han gets used to being a hero, his reasons for clashing with Leia die off. That should work. But here's the problem. I had to figure all that out. Never once do Han and Leia actually talk about Han changing the way he sees Leia's tendency to push him. And the fact that Han's growth is tied to Luke makes it feel unrelated to his progress with Leia. Unless you think about things long and hard enough, it looks like Han's worst behavior towards her is how he flirts. And Leia falls for Han when he's still ignoring her pleas for him to stop. It feels like these films are telling us the best way to get a girlfriend is to torment her until she's completely defeated. And not everyone is going to think that long and hard about it. I know not everyone is going to agree with me about Han and Leia, but let's all just remember that disagreements can be done respectfully. I will allow comments that go something like this. A respectable perspective, but when I think of Han and Leia, I think of their comedic chemistry and the lack of enmity between Luke and Han despite their positions on the love triangle. Next, let's talk about Anakin and Padme in the prequel trilogy. I'm going green for this segment. A long time ago, I made a couple reviews about Anakin and Padme. I have since unlisted that video and put it in a playlist called These Videos Are Bad, so I unlisted them, because my speaking in that video was atrocious. I'll be recycling probably most of the script and using clips from that video that don't have me in them. Don't bother to look up that video in the playlist, because I'll be saying the same things here with better delivery. The Phantom Menace, the first film in the prequel trilogy, has Anakin and Padme meeting at the ages of 9 and 14. They're supposed to build a fondness that lasts until they reunite years later, when they're both adults. But The Phantom Menace doesn't properly set up the level of fondness that exists at the beginning of the second film, Attack of the Clones. Jar Jar distracts from the first meeting with his slapstick, There's not many scenes with them together after that.
I don't fully understand. This is a strange place to me.
No, Mrs. Stay.
What?
Missa called Jaja Binks. Missa your humble servant.
Missa caused maybe one or two little bitty accidents.
You'd say, boom to gasser, then crash into bus's hay blibber, then vanish.
You're a funny little boy.
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
I'm glad to have met you, Anakin.
I was glad to meet you too.
Sure, there's a scene where Padme consoles him, and I understand that this is a welcome stark contrast to the cold presences in his life, but we're supposed to believe that these interactions led to him still being completely obsessed with her 10 years later.
Annie? My goodness, you've grown.
So have you. Grown more beautiful, I mean. Well, for a senator, I mean.
Annie, you'll always be that little boy I knew on Tatooine.
A lot of Attack of the Clones, the second film in the prequel trilogy, is spent with Anakin and Padme building their relationship. That sounds like it should make for a compelling couple, but what they're doing together is uninteresting, and their dialogue is horrific.
If Master Obi-Wan caught me doing this, he'd be very grumpy.
These scenes between them are painfully boring, and it was clearly a mistake to make Padme a politician because it ties her to the most boring aspect of the prequel trilogy, that being the political drama.
A tragedy has occurred, which started right here with the taxation of trade routes.
This is outrageous! I object to the Senator's statement.
Into the bureaucrats, the true rulers of the Republic, and on the payroll of a trade federation, I might add.
Padme is too often kept away from the war, and thus she keeps the films away from the war.
I guess we still trade federations and
A lot of people wonder why Padme would like Anakin, because there seems to be nothing appealing about him. The funny thing is, Anakin is presented as if he has attractive qualities, but those qualities are so poorly written that it feels like there's nothing to him but angst. For example, Anakin makes Padme laugh multiple times, but his jokes are never good enough to make the audience laugh.
You really don't like politicians, do you?
I like 2 or 3, but I'm not really sure about one of them.
It almost seems like George Lucas asked a good writer how to get an audience invested in a romantic relationship. He wrote down everything he was told, and then he failed every step in execution. Anakin and Padme want to be with each other, but the Jedi forbid their members to have attachments. And Padme is a politician, which, it would be bad for her reputation if she was dating a Jedi, I guess. It doesn't really make sense for her to worry about her reputation. Just because the Jedi take issue with attachments, that doesn't mean the rest of the galaxy cares. Would you care if someone from a different religion broke a vow of celibacy? Enforcing celibacy is barbaric, by the way.
If you follow your thoughts through to conclusion, it'll take us to a place we cannot go.
You are asking me to be rational. That is something I know I cannot do. We could keep it a secret.
I couldn't do that. Could you, Anakin? Could you live like that?
No. It would destroy us.
A funny story, it does. A lot of people say Anakin has too much of an anger issue for anyone to want to date him, citing the scene where he says he killed the women and the children.
I killed them all. Every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals.
Personally, I give him a pass for that scene because he's talking about the tribe of Tusken Raiders that just killed his mother. And as far as Anakin knows, Tuskens don't have redeeming qualities. But those excuses won't save him from the other instances where he let his anger make him act a fool.
We'll take him together. You're going slowly on the left.
Taking him now! No, Anakin, no! No!
Foolishness. Now do not tell me that I don't understand the brilliance of it all. I get what's going on here. Padme's failure to properly react to Anakin's anger is part of what turns Anakin to the dark side. What Anakin needed was someone with a spine to tell him when he's acting crazy. But Ahsoka was underaged at the time, so he got Padme instead, and thus ended up killing younglings. Padme's failure fuels Anakin's journey to the dark side, but that was outweighed by the fact that his anger issues made their relationship so unappealing. Speaking of unappealing...
Please don't look at me like that.
Why not?
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Sorry, milady.
After getting themselves captured, Anakin and Padme kiss, thinking that they don't need to worry about their reputations because they're about to die anyway. Unfortunately, they don't die, and they decide not to backpedal on the kissing. So they get married? Sure, why not? The anger issue thing isn't the only way Padme turns Anakin into a monster. Her insistence on keeping their marriage a secret prevents Anakin from seeking help and drives him to resent those he keeps the secret from.
Do you think Obi-Wan might be able to help us?
We don't need his help.
I think there's two possible ways to look at the attachment rule and its role in Anakin turning to the dark side. It kind of looks like Anakin fell to the dark side because of his attachments, but really I think Anakin fell to the dark side because he wasn't allowed to be open about those attachments. The views of the Jedi Order are warped and cold, and take a heavy toll on those who suffer their practices. Anakin gets visions of Padme dying, and he'll do anything to keep that from happening. He talks to Yoda about his visions, but he's vague about who's dying. Yoda's advice does not help. He basically tells Anakin to rejoice in the death.
Death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them do not. Miss them do not.
There's an episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars where Ahsoka gets visions of Padme dying. The difference is that Ahsoka makes no secrets of her concerns, and openly accompanies Padme for protection. Unlike Anakin, Ahsoka is able to save Padme from what happens in her death vision because she didn't have to keep secrets. I think if Anakin could have asked for help from the Jedi in more detail, he wouldn't have been so susceptible to Palpatine, who was the only person offering a solution. Ultimately, the Emperor was able to turn Anakin into a monster by pretending to fill the needs that Padme forced on him. But Anakin's fall to the dark side is far too rushed. You see him go from the Republic's finest hero to a child butcher pretty quick. I get that the dark side is corrosive, but still. Once she sees what Anakin's become, Padme is horrified and he force chokes her, knocking her out. Padme dies later because she was sad. I'm not a doctor, but I think you can die from a stress-related heart attack, which can be caused by a broken heart, maybe. But I still have to call shenanigans. There's one reason why I can't defend this film against the criticism of having a girl die of heartbreak. If Padme can die from losing Anakin, why can't Anakin die from losing Padme? He knows she's dead, and rightfully blames himself for it. He doesn't even know that his babies were born in time, so he thinks he killed his own offspring too. On top of that, Anakin was just burned after losing several limbs. He's lost everything, and in servitude to an emperor he hates. And yet he didn't die of heartbreak. Plus, Padme had more to live for. The medical droid tells us that the reason she's dying is because she's lost the will to live. A mother who just gave birth to twins has no business not having the will to live. Why is it that Padme can be killed by a lack of will to live when she has 2 babies, while Anakin survives dismemberment, burning, and a lot more sadness? This relationship is terrible, full of boredom, plot holes, and young adult dialogue. Still a better love story than Rey and Kylo Ren. A lot of people have recognized the prequel's potential and presented their own versions of how that potential could have been used better. So how would I fix this relationship? First of all, Padme should have been a Jedi, so she wouldn't either take focus away from the fun stuff or be left out of the fun stuff. If she was a Jedi, she could have bonded with Anakin during missions more often, instead of sitting around in meetings and talking about sand. Second of all, the whole Chosen One thing is gobbledygook and I hate it. It makes Anakin's story cliched. All that rubbish about Anakin being a random slave they found that happened to have the strongest Force potential, get rid of it. They already had a better way for Anakin to be in the Jedi Order that would have given him a perfectly legitimate reason to betray the Jedi Order. Most Jedi are taken from their families at a young age and put into their strict training and ridiculous rules. That's reason enough for anyone to turn into a supervillain. Instead, the films we actually got gave Anakin a backstory where he should be grateful to the Jedi for releasing him from slavery. So Anakin and Padme should have both been Jedi, taken from their families at a young age, and stifled by the Order's policies on attachments. The Jedi Order find out about their relationship as well as Padme's pregnancy, and they force Padme to stay put at a military base until they decide how to punish her. It's there that Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia. Then there's an attack on that base. Padme, being a Jedi, holds off the enemy forces while her babies are evacuated by a trusted ally. Having gone through labor less than a day ago, Padme can only fight for so long before she's gunned down. Anakin finds out that she died because she was forced to stay there by the dogmatic Jedi, and he's ready to destroy the entire Order. That would have made Darth Vader a much more sympathetic villain, and put his actions in a different light. Joining the Empire and destroying the Jedi would have been something he did in Padme's honor, as opposed to spitting on everything she stood for. And that's how I would have rewritten the relationship between Anakin and Padme. Next up, Rey and Kylo Ren from the abhorrent sequel trilogy. I think the first time I watched The Force Awakens, the first film in the sequel trilogy, I thought for sure they were setting Rey up with Finn. And a considerable percentage of the fan base thought that Finn was going to end up with Poe. And either one of those options would have been better than Finn having nothing, which is what happened. Finn blatantly showed interest in Rey, but they just forgot about that. And Lucasfilm was never going to put Finn and Poe in a same-sex interracial relationship. They just wanted a free excuse to call themselves progressive while calling the critics racist and homophobic. They didn't want to actually flesh out a gay relationship or give the Black and Latin characters a well-written subplot. The Force Awakens also introduced Kylo Ren's fixation on Rey. Kylo instantly starts treating Rey like she's the most important thing going on, even though she hasn't earned that. And the way he's acting reads more like crazy stalker behavior than a foundation for a healthy relationship. And yet, this is the pairing that will end up kissing. The fact that Finn has already showed so much interest in Rey, and is clearly much better for her, makes Rey and Kylo a hard sell. If Finn wasn't part of the equation, I would say enemies to lovers can work if you work hard to properly craft the transition. It helps if you take it in stages, having them go from enemies to dubious allies, then from dubious allies to friends, and then friends to lovers. That's not what Rey and Kylo Ren did. Also, while we're talking about romance as it pertains to The Force Awakens, Han and Leia are separated. I would be furious about that if I shipped them the way a lot of people do. In The Last Jedi, the second film in the sequel trilogy, Kylo spends most of the movie wanting Rey to join him, and tells her that she's nothing unless she joins him, which is pretty toxic. Now is a great time to remind you that this is the pairing that ends up kissing. If they wanted to do enemies to lovers with Rey and Kylo, they didn't have time for this foolishness so late in the game. Kylo being this toxic at the end of the second movie in the trilogy meant that their progress would have to start from scratch in the final film in the trilogy. Meanwhile, Finn has been off on his pointless adventure with Rose. And when Rose gave him a kiss, everyone, including Finn himself, said, "Huh?" It should feel natural for them to have feelings for each other, since they've spent so much of the movie together, but all the scenes with them are so easy to forget that it might as well be flying out of nowhere. Not only because they had a lack of memorable chemistry, this was confusing. Because The Force Awakens convinced everyone that Finn was into Rey and Poe was into Finn. But of course a film in the sequel trilogy wouldn't follow through on something set up in a previous film. The sequels have so much hate for previous Star Wars films, they don't even like each other. Lastly, there's The Rise of Skywalker. As always, all of Finn's previously established romantic illusions are forgotten and never brought up. It's a running joke at this point. Kylo Ren insists that Rey wants him. Rey tells him she wanted him to be a better person, and they turn out to be a Force dyad. What's a Force dyad, you ask? Something about the Force connecting two people, which is how they communicate across vast distances. This is a huge mistake in practice, because we know all their feelings for each other can be written off as a side effect of this Force connection that has nothing to do with their compatibility with each other. Their connection is arbitrary. It's not rooted in them having similar values or personalities the other enjoys. They have interest in each other because the Force took the choice out of their hands. Rey and Kylo don't have a mystical connection because they love each other. They love each other because they have a mystical connection. That's not romantic. This dyad thing would have been a lot better if done in reverse. They could have grown feelings for each other for legitimate reasons, and those feelings could have created a connection through the Force. Imagine if they had fallen in love and reached out to each other by choice, and the Force legitimized their love by allowing them to communicate across space. Later in The Rise of Skywalker, Kylo has a rushed redemption and goes to help Rey with the Emperor, and their reconciliation is undercooked. Kylo saves her with Force healing, and she gives him a kiss that is so unearned that the director backpedaled by calling this a kiss of gratitude, not love. I'm pretty sure that kisses of gratitude go on the cheek. Because Kylo gave too much of his life energy to heal Rey, he dies. If you didn't ship Rey and Kylo, you're angry that they kissed, and if you did ship them, you're disappointed that he died right after. Everyone loses. That's what Star Wars is now. Rey and Kylo had no healthy bonding time, no chemistry, and the minute they got together, it ended. If you were expecting a deep journey where Rey slowly begins to trust Kylo, and Kylo's redemption is subject to possible relapse, and Kylo's guilt causes him to question his right to be happy with Rey, I think that your expectations were too high for this production. I mean, these films are the results of hundreds of people using millions of dollars over the course of several years. They don't have the power of a free fan fiction written by one guy over the course of a few months. I know there are people who do ship Rey and Kylo Ren. I think part of the appeal is an I can change him thing. The basic concept of a romance between a Jedi and a Sith had potential that people's imagination ran wild with between film releases. If you do like these concepts and do ship Rey and Kylo Ren, I give you no shame for it, but I want you to recognize that the things you've imagined in your head that could have happened between Rey and Kylo are better than what actually happened in the sequel trilogy. Earlier, I outlined how I would try to improve the prequel trilogy, but the idea of rewriting the sequel trilogy using the concepts and character it presents makes my mind go blank. The characters are rubbish, the First Order is lazy, and the plot points are depressing. There's nothing to salvage out of this mess. If I had to rewrite the sequel trilogy, I would throw everything out and start from scratch. But I currently don't have the love for Star Wars required to do that. Every time I thought we were seeing signs that they might right the ship, they would fire Gina Carano, or announce another Rey movie. Not too long ago, they announced that they were re-releasing Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, the original versions, you know, the good versions. And that just makes me think, I don't trust you. There's some sort of monkey's paw attached to this in some way. If only there was something to replace Star Wars with. Like another sci-fi fantasy thing with the word war in the title. So remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, and to not trust Lucasfilm.